Well, jeepers! You're listening to Smash or Pass.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another interview on the JayBee and Milly channel. I am JayBee, and of course, with me is Milly.
Hi.
And the special guest who will be interviewing today is Salli Saffioti. Thank you so much for joining.
Oh, hi. So nice to be here.
Well, it is incredible to have you here today. Of course, there's a lot of highlights of your career that we can't wait to dive into. But of course, what better place to start than the start? And just looking through your website, I saw that you started your career in New York on stage on the theatre. But before that point, what really inspired you to get into, theatre acting and acting in general?
It was for me, it was one of those things where no one in my family was doing it. I just remember being like a little girl, and I really think it was like the Wizard of Oz. And I saw that and I was like, "Oh my gosh." I was like, "I don't know what that is, but that's me. Like I'm supposed to do that." Like, and I didn't even know what that was. And then I remember being my mom used to watch really like dramatic black and white movies. Like, and if I was homesick from school, I remember like laying there and watching these movies that were probably totally inappropriate for a little kid to watch, love dramas and someone jumping off a cliff and things like that. And I was like, oh, like the magic of this is incredible. And then my dad took me to my first Broadway show. Um, the Wiz, which is just coming back around right now, which I got to see it out here right before it went to Broadway, and it was the very first show I saw, and I think I was 6 years old, and that was for me. And I wasn't even like I want to do musical theater because that wasn't my thing. I was just like, that's it. I know my purpose in this life. You know what I mean? I was like, I have no idea how you get to be one of those people, but I'm gonna figure it out. And my family's not people that were able to like support that idea. They thought it was like a crazy idea for the big saying in the house was like, people like us, like meaning people like me, them, like we don't go to college, we don't live in New York City, we don't do things like acting, any of these great ideas I had, that wasn't their great idea. So I think it all really started, with a couple of those movies that were really intensely transportive, and then seeing The Wiz on Broadway just like solidified this little percolating thing that I didn't even know what it was. So that's where it started for me.
I mean, that's really inspiring to hear. Like you said, at 6 years old, you went, and like you say, some of the times it's just the magic of the theatre, it just draws
Oh,
you
yeah.
in so
Yeah,
much. And
yeah.
it was really interesting you mentioned The Wizard of Oz because growing up for me, that certainly was such an important movie. My gran got me a special edition of it that I still have when I was really, really
Wow.
young. So,
Wow.
in regards to that, like you said, it was one of the first things that really inspired you. Do you remember if it was kind of watching the movie at home? What was kind of your earliest memory with it?
Well, so I'm older than you, I'm certain. And back in the day, like The Wizard of Oz would come on like once a year, right? And you'd look in the I don't know if people I was didn't look myself, but like the grown-ups would like look in the paper or there was something called the TV guide, which I don't even think exists anymore. And you'd like figure out when it was gonna happen, like the night that it was coming on, and you'd plan with the neighbors or your cousins or whoever. And it was like an event, right? Because it was once a year. There wasn't like VHSs or DVDs or anything like that. No streaming. So it was like you had to wait for that big moment. And I think it made it like it was so special, right? To get to experience that. And what I loved about that was that it was this girl who's got like, all these trials and tribulations like we all have, like growing up, like trouble with the neighbors, like not being understood, whatever, feeling like you have to work too much, like whatever it is, the stuff. And, she kind of through her own fantasy life was able to escape that and learn some lessons, for herself, and to basically to be grateful and appreciative, and also still strive for bigger things. And I think that was what I wanted to believe was possible when I was little, because I came from like, just nothing like what my life is now, right? And felt very misunderstood, And then it's funny that The Wiz happened to be the first Broadway show, which is like the story of the Wizard of Oz also on stage. And it was just like, like, but there they were live and like they're like feeding off the crowd, and you just felt that energy was so palpable. And I knew I really just wanted to be a stage actor. I was never like, "Oh, I want to be famous." Like, that was never my thing either. I didn't even care really about money. I just was, I mean, I was little, so I didn't know. I was just like, I just know I want to do that. I want to make people feel something. I want to make people know that anything is possible if you put your mind to it. You know, if I could make this career for myself, I know that anyone can do anything because there was a lot of obstacles in the way. So I think like the theme of that show, from the movie to the stage, plus the energy of the experience of getting the event of it, seeing it on TV and then seeing it on Broadway, all of it kind of rolled into this big dreamer that I was. And like, okay, you can't just dream it. Like, you got to take some action. You got to figure it out. And, you know, and I feel so grateful every minute of every day that somehow I've figured it out, you know, and it's still not quite what I would have dreamed of, you know, but it's pretty darn good, you know.
Oh, it's so interesting because just the thought of working on the stage, performing in the theatre is on another level entirely. And even just from an audience perspective, there is something so different and so almost ironically cinematic about going to the theatre compared with going to, the big screen of a movie. They're both good. But when you take that experience and then put it in New York, that's almost like two layers of craziness. So in terms of all that, if you can boil it down to one or maybe a handful, do you have any favorite memories from your time working in the theater?
Oh my gosh, all of them. And I will tell you that all I dream about today is moving back to New York City and getting to do more theater. I did a ton of theater out here too. But going back to your question, so in New York, I had a theater company. I was taking 21 credits in school. I had 3 jobs because I had to pay for everything myself. And but I knew I needed to do theater, right? I just knew. So I was like, there was a paper that would put out the auditions, and I think now it's online. It was called like Backstage was the paper, where you would go and you'd submit a picture. If they give you an appointment, you would get to go to audition for something, and nothing ever paid anything, which was fine because I was really like I wanted to do it for the art of it and for my soul. And I really thought like for me, that was the way that I would be able to affect, I don't know, change or hope or shift someone's perspective by going to the theater. Like if I was in something. So from an outside one that I did, I was in this play called Bomb in Gilead, and it's pretty intense. It's set in the 60s, I think, and like hippies. Like, so I played like a lesbian hippie. And it was such an educational experience for me, just being in the play, because I didn't know anything really about that time period, number one, but the inner workings of like what it was like to, you know, from the not gangs, but turf wars and interpersonal relationships. That play like dives into from a boss to an employee, what that's like, a coworkers, what that's like, the regulars that come in and how you treat them, the ones that are the troublemakers. Like it was just like it was a huge cast, and that was one of my favorite experiences, and we did it for quite a while at this super cool theater, like just right off the Hudson River, and just like getting off the subway every day and like walking there. I was just like oh, that's it for me. Like I'm so proud of myself. No, I don't have a dollar, but I'm good. Like I feel my soul is full. So that was one of them. I also had a really good time when I was in college. I went to college in New York City also, and I was a theater arts major because I wasn't supposed to I'll be allowed to act, but I found my way around it. And I was in Alice in Wonderland, and I played Alice, and they kind of rewrote it, threw in a couple songs. It got published, like my name's like in it now in the publishing, and that was super cool too because I was also kind of like a Wizard of Oz fan. I was also an Alice in Wonderland fan, and I was just like I couldn't believe when I got to do that show. And that show, they opened it up to the schools in New York City. So you're performing for like hundreds and hundreds of children. And that was the first time in my life I ever experienced. And I was like maybe 19, right? And I come out from the play and there's these kids like I'm one of the Beatles, they're like, it's Alice, and you're just like, oh my gosh, they're like, can you sign my this? Can you sign my that? And I was like, oh my goodness, and I was hugging them all, and I was also a nanny. That was one of my day jobs, so I've always loved children, so that was a super cool experience. I mean, there were so many. This other play I did, Dungeons, which also ended up getting published. That was with my theater company. It was written by this guy Dave Patterson. His mom is a famous writer. She wrote Bridge to Terabithia. Um, and we did that, and we produced it and everything, and I was like, it was like an older black gentleman, an older white guy, and me, and I played this like homeless girl that lived kind of in the sewer system of New York, and there was an explosion, and this white guy's Mercedes ends up like underground, and he's trapped and he can't get out, but it's like my home. And this older black gentleman also lives down there, but he kind of is like a fatherly figure and takes care of me, and it's a great piece because it everyone's learning a lesson too, right? Like I'm learning how to be a little more like normal, and the white guy is learning how to not be so rigid with his boundaries of perceptions of people, and then when it comes time for when they finally, like toward the end of the play, you hear the workers, and he's going to be able to get out and stuff like that, and he almost doesn't want to go, like, because it was like probably the greatest experience of his life, and I love that too, how, like, so the message being some of the worst experiences in your life can turn out to have the greatest gift, right? So anyway, those are a few of my favorites.
That is absolutely incredible because just there is so many like amazing stories that can be conveyed through all like different types of mediums. Like I kind of did compare it to in the theater, almost like reading a book that's on print, that's on ink. Whereas seeing a movie can sometimes feel a bit like reading from an ebook, but at the same time as well, there's so much more that's possible for all the different mediums, and I think all mediums are absolutely amazing. And what amazed me looking through your like IMDb is just the amount of versatility there. It's just
Mm.
incredible because then, as well, you went on to do some on-screen things such as the double in Tracy Takes On. So how was it like to go from something that was more on screen, from that theater experience?
Well, it's funny because I know for a lot of people the crossover is not great, or they think they want to do it, but it's whatever, it doesn't work out. The shift is not something that comes naturally. For me, I found it to come super easily. I When I was in high school, that's when I was like, I knew that like I had to try to figure this out, and my dad was like, nope, you're on your own. And so I found this, like, I kind of, they don't have this anymore either, the yellow pages. I opened up the yellow pages, like bit where the businesses are, and I just looked up acting schools, like, and I would just scan through, and there was one like in the next town over, and I called, and I was like, all right, I was like, this is what I want to do. And I auditioned for the guy, and he was like, wow, you're really good. And I was like, oh, thanks. And he was like, oh, this is how much the classes are. And I was like, oh, wow, wow. Okay, yeah, that's not happening over here. I was like, but I'm going to put it on my wish list or whatever. And he said, well, once a year I have scholarship auditions, so maybe you should audition for a scholarship. And I did. I auditioned and I got in. So I got to go for free, and I would barter with some of my neighbors because I would take care of their kids, and I'd be like, hey, could you drive me to my acting class? Because my dad was really not happy about this idea, but he would drive sometimes. But it was an on-camera acting school, so I had been doing tons of theater, community theater in high school, um, and this one, I had never been in front of a camera, like, so it's like, and you would do, and it was like pretty cheesy. I mean, some of it was commercial, some of it was scenes, but you got to see, because you'd watch a playback of your scenes, you got to see what worked, what didn't work, the things that like you thought you were being really subtle, but on that little screen, it looked like, oh my gosh, you know what I mean? And I think I'm going, oh my gosh, right? Like, so it's like it was a great training ground, I think. So when it came time to my very first on camera role, I moved out here. I was not intending to stay in California. I still want to go back to New York, but I've been here for a long time. And my very first audition was for this TV show called In the House with LL Cool J and Kim Wayans and Alfonso Ribeiro. And they were like hiring a receptionist. And she just had a few lines, like no big deal. But it was my very first time. Like, and so they were like, all right, do you have any questions? And I said, no, I said, I prepared it 3 ways. They were like, huh? I was like, yeah, just get, sorry, I don't know really what the protocol is. I was like, but I'm just gonna, can I just do it like 3 times? And they were like, yeah, I guess, yeah, sure, you know. And so I kind of did one choice, and then the thing I always remember from those classes was make bold choices. Whatever you do, make a bold choice. And so, and my third choice, I just kind of like made it like really New Yorky, like kind of like the way I grew up, right? And I did it this like total New York take, and they were like, and so I booked the part, and what I find is every time to this day, I don't care what it is, I learn every single time. I'm on a set, I'm in a booth. I'm so open to knowing that I know nothing, even though I'm experienced, you know? Like, I think that's a good way to approach it, because like Tracy Takes On, for instance, I booked that part because like I had auditioned the year before, and I think I did like 7 characters or something. They just kind of said, these are all like little bit parts. So why don't you just pick a couple? And so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do all of them. And they were like, oh, yeah, you don't need to. I was like, okay, well, I prepared 7. So can I just do 7? They're like 2 lines each. Like, let's just do that. So I did that, and I didn't hear anything. And then the next season they were like, oh, you're going to be like the jury foreman or something. At the end of the season, you're going to be the jury foreman. And it was literally like, we the jury find the defendant, and she goes, not, and I go, guilty as charged. And that was the whole part. And but one of my day jobs, I worked for this super high-end fashion designer in New York, and she couldn't pay me any money, but she would give me clothes. Like, I mean, she paid me like almost nothing. She gave me really, so I had like clothes that looked like I was, you know, a millionaire, you know. So I had on this really nice blouse and this whatever funky jacket, because the wardrobe people liked what I had on so much. They were like, oh, why don't you just wear that? And I said, okay, yeah, sure, I can wear my clothes. So Tracy comes chasing after me. Sally, she's like, oh my god, darling, can I see that shirt? And I was like, oh, sure, yeah, sure. And she's like, oh my god, what is it? What's the brand? I said, oh, I said it's this woman, and her name's Drozdik. And she's like, how do you spell it? Like DROZDZIK. What? I've never heard of it. I said, well, because she makes like 5 pieces a season, period. Oh, she's like, well, this is right up my alley, because she's a fashionista, you know? And she's like, can I see the seams? I was like, yeah, French seams. Oh yeah, I did quality control for her. She's like, you did? She's like, oh my God, like, I'm never going to forget you. And oh my God, we got to have you back on, you know? I was like, sure, you know where to find me. Didn't think a thing. The next season, her double had left to go have a baby. So they were trying to cast the double, and she thought of me, probably because she remembered my, cute clothes. And then I did like 9 auditions for that. And then the last one was her and I together, reading together. And she would do her character, I would do her character. She would do her character, I would do her character. Like, it was like from the movements to the voice. They were like measuring my face. Oh, her face is too this, and oh, she's too short, and oh, she's like, it's like hearing all these, everything that's wrong with you
Oh
from these
gosh.
people is so yucky, you know. And then she was like, I don't care, make it work, you know. She's like, that's who I want her. And then that changed my life, because that one in particular, I mean, it's not like I made a bucket ton of money or I started working all the time, but I learned on that set more than anyone could ever learn in like 20 years of acting school. It was like I'm working with like Gary Oldman one day, Jeffrey Tambor the next day, like, and I would be her doing the scene with them, and maybe she's one of her other characters, you know. So it was just like learning like from the best in the world every day, but you're like an equal, but not quite an equal, you know, when you're a double. So, but she let me, like, she'd be like, I need to go home early. Can you finish out with whoever? So it would be me and Corbin Burnson, you know, in a limousine playing out the scene, and I'm doing her character, you know, or Bob Costas or whoever. It was like she had everybody on that show. So it was really cool to see how she does it, you know, and we became pretty good friends during that time, and yeah, I learned so much, and I think that that's the key. Is just always staying open to learning and being humble, and knowing that even when you know, you don't know.
It certainly sounds like you had an amazing experience, and it's really interesting to hear what you say there about just approaching every project so openly. Are there any differences for you when you're preparing for something that is on screen versus something that is in the theatre?
Well, I mean, the luxury of the theater is that you have like a month, 6 weeks, something like that, to rehearse before you go on, right? So it's like every time, first of all, you're doing your own inner work at home, whether you're writing a monologue as the character yourself, like what is this character really thinking, or what brought this character to this moment. You've also got the director guiding you, right, all the time. You have access to it on a daily basis, whereas like for a film or a TV show, sometimes you might get to do a read through with everyone, but then you show up on set and like you better just have done your work all on your own. And yeah, there's a director there, but as a guest star, or someone who's there for like a week and they're shooting for months, you know what I mean? You're not going to get very much attention. You'll get like little guide rails, but um, you have to do all of the inner work yourself and come up with the backstory, and whereas like in the theater, you're living and breathing that every single day of your life when you're in rehearsals leading up to the show. And then even when you're in the show, you're kind of still discovering, right? Because you're getting to play that character every night or whatever, 5 nights a week. And the character that you portray at the beginning of the run of a show and at the end of the run of the show is drastically different, in my opinion. I mean, that's why I'll go see a show multiple times, you know, if time and money allow, because I find it so interesting to see. Even on, you can go 2 nights in a row and have a totally different show, right? Because that's the beauty of theater. It's palpable, right? It's all happening in the moment, and one thing that's like off, it changes the whole course of the show, or someone jumps to the next scene, and everyone's like, do we bring it, like there's that moment of like, are we bringing it back, or are we just moving on, and someone's going to say something clever to like weave it all together. Like, you know, there's like, it's so exciting. Like, I find theater is just like, I can't wait. My son is 15 years old now, so I did one play when he was younger, and I got pneumonia because it's a lot, right? I already work a lot of hours doing voiceovers, and I'd come home from the theater and I'd do all my auditions that we're due in the morning. So I'm going to bed at like 2:30, waking up at 5. You know what I mean? It was too much for me, but he's getting older now, so I like. Then I'm like, all right, well, he probably doesn't want to hang out with me at night, you know. Anyway, so at some point I will do some more theater again because I desperately miss it.
That sounds amazing. I mean, certainly, like you say, hopefully that's something that you'll be able to do very soon. And you'd started to mention the voiceover as well. I think, like JayBee was saying at the start, just from IMDb, just how versatile you are across every project you do. How is it that you then took that next step into voice acting?
Well, that I really credit that to the Tracy Ullman show, because it was like a fluke thing, right? I was at my friend's dad had written a movie, and they invited me to be like a guest at the red carpet night or whatever. And they were like, "Oh, do you want to walk the red carpet?" I was like, "No, I'm not. I have nothing to do with this movie. Like, I feel like this a desperate person if I was gonna walk on that red carpet." So I was like, "I'm just gonna wait right over there." And I had a little glass of wine, and I was like taking an hors d'oeuvre when they walked by, and I was just happy on my own. And this guy came up to me, and he like changed the course of my life. He was a huge fan of the Tracy Ullman show. Someone had told him that I was like the double, and I also did my own characters, and he just knew everything about it. And he's like, oh, come on, like, do Chick the Cab Driver, do Ruby Romaine, do like Linda Granger. And I was like, thanks. I was like, no, I'm also from New York, so I don't really bark on command. I was like, but thanks, like, take care, and he's like, oh, come on. But he's funny. Like, he's like, I naturally am someone who, when I tell a story, I tend to go into the person's voice. I've just always been like that. I don't know why. Maybe my dad does that. I don't know, but it's like, I'll be like, yeah, and he's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, I just go into a voice. So he was like that. So maybe I have another glass of wine. I'm like, all right, I'll do Ruby Romaine. I'll do, and I start doing them. And he's just like, oh my God. He's like, who's the millionaire that represents your voice? And I was like, oh, I'm not a singer. I didn't even know what voiceover was, okay? And he's like, oh, okay, well, whatever. But no, I'm talking about for your characters. And I was like, well, I'm an on-camera actor and a theater actor. And he's like, no, but who, do you not know about voiceover? And I was like, I don't. And he's like, well, you do commercials, right? And I was like, no, I don't want to do commercials. Like, that's not for me. And he's like, well, okay, animation, video games. He's like, you do everything. And he's like, in your ear is incredible. I mean, you got her characters. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing. He's like, your life just changed. And I was like, I was like, well, if I had $1 for every time someone in this town told me my life just changed, like, I'd be a millionaire about now. And he's like, oh, give me your number. And I was like, dude, if you want to ask me out, just ask me out. He's like, I'm married, and I was like, okay, here's my number. And he's like, you're going to get a call from ICM. And that was like the biggest agency at the time. And I was like, okay. I was like, thank you so much. It was very nice to meet you. And I just don't even think anything about it, because really, prior to the pandemic, when people are like out and about in the world, people would say stuff like that all the time, like, especially in theater. Yeah, you were going to give you your own show. And I was like, oh my, first you're like, oh my God, amazing. And after a while, you're like, no one's giving me a show. Like, it's not happening like that. And I got a call, I don't even know, 6 weeks later from ICM, from a receptionist, or I don't know what you call them, but she was like, I Salli Saffioti, I've got Jeff Davis on line for you. And the guy was like, I've never received a call like this about anyone in the history of my career. I really think I need to meet you. Have you ever been in front of a microphone? And I was like, well, yeah, I was like, some of my friends are musicians, so I've been in the studio, like, and maybe they asked me to sound check for them, but no, not like that, not like you're talking about. And he's like, well, come in. It's probably not going to work. And anyway, they ended up signing me, and it wasn't really the right fit for me because they were so intense, and it's just snotty, a little snotty. I'm not very snotty. I'm just a normal person. And so anyway, it didn't quite work out. They didn't get rid of me. They kept me, but I booked a little bit. And then someone told me that when you were with the top one, you can go anywhere that you want, even if you didn't have a demo, because I didn't have a demo. I didn't have anything like that. So then I switched agents, and I was with those guys for like 14 years before I switched to my agents now that I've been with for over 10 now. So it's been good. Like that guy, but that guy changed the course of my life. That's how I got into voiceover. He's the one who told me about it. When I was at ICM, it was really just commercials. Then when I went to, it was called CED at the time. Now it's called CESD. I was like, I really need to do more. Like, I have all these people that live inside of me, and like, they need to get out. And it took them a while too, but they finally let me read for video games. And that's how I got started. And I booked like my first one with an accent. And, because I went to school, I also went to RADA for the summer course. So I knew from that like, whatever, my British accent was pretty good at the very least, and plus I grew up in an Italian family. We spoke Italian, I could speak French pretty fluently. Like, I was like, all right, that's a lot going on there. And then I didn't get a shot at animation there. I got to do promos there. And then when the agency I'm with now, Atlas, came after me, I just kind of said, I need to do everything. Like, I really need animation, a shot at that too, because I've been knocking at the door, but no one's letting me in, and just at least let me knock at the door, And they did, and they have. And, I'm not like regulars on a bunch of shows or anything like that, but I've done, quite a bit of animation now, and I love it so much. I love the video games too, but getting to do all those different characters is what keeps it interesting for me.
Oh yeah, definitely, because you've definitely had a lot of like really interesting roles, both in animation and in video games. And it's funny
Mm.
that you mention accents because the one that I was thinking of quite significantly was Black Widow from Spider-Man: Web of Shadows. And so what was that whole experience like?
Well, that was funny because that one, I didn't even know, right? That was now if I had done that before when I had my son, I would have known all about who Black Widow was. Like, I didn't know who Black Widow was. I didn't know anything about that. I didn't know like Marvel was a thing. It just I didn't grow up with that. Um, so I booked it because of that like not Middle Eastern, Eastern European accent. And at the end they were like, "Oh, and today you're going to be speaking Russian." And I was like, "Ah." Mm. And it's like up on the screen and I was like, "Huh." They're like, "Well, I forget the guy's name. He's Russian, so he's going to say like it and you're going to repeat it." And I was like, my heart was like, I was like, "Oh yeah, cool, cool, that's great." It's like, oh my God, I never done that before. And it was hard. That was hard. Speaking a language like Russian, I think, is really challenging. Prince of Persia, I had to speak Farsi. That was also really challenging. But like that's the fun bits, right? I mean, it's all fun, but when you get to do something that never in your entire life would you ever have imagined that you would ever do, because why would there be the reason to do it? Like it's like, why would you ever have to speak Russian in your life unless you were going to Russia or you married a Russian or whatever? Like, it's just not really something that would come up. So that's when I really realized that it was a skill, being able to not only just do an accent, but hold that accent like you do it all the time. And people always ask me where does that skill come from, because I never have taken an accent class or anything. But my dad was a bus driver in Queens, Jamaica. Queens is kind of like not a very good part of town. Now it's much better, but it was really sketchy back then. And the route would be like if you wanted to get into New York City. So it would be like you'd have to take this bus to go to the Jamaica Queens train station, or to get the bus from Jamaica Queens to get into the city. So it was a lot of uh, lower income immigrants that rode the bus early in the morning because everyone was trying to get to work. And because my dad had it was called the 4:30 report, 4:30 a.m. So if I wasn't in school, I would have to go to work with him. So we'd wake up at 3:30, have a cup of tea, get in the car, go to this really bad part of town, where the bus depot was, and you get on that bus. It'd be like me and my dad, and I'd have like my teddy bear and Mad Libs, and and I would just basically be there like for 9 hours with him, and I would just talk to all these people, like, because what else are you gonna do for 9 hours? After a while, it's like really boring. So I'd be like, "Hi, hey Sally, what's your name?" And it was like, there'd be the like every nationality you could and I just remember, even if I wasn't talking to them, if they were talking to people, I'd be almost like recording it, like repeating it in my head, like, wow, like that is so fascinating. And I was like, is it like where is that sound coming from? And then I would go home and like play, and not thinking that it's this is what an actor does, or this is voiceover, like just like being fascinated by the sounds of different languages and different accents. And I never knew it was a thing, like, but who knew that riding on that bus would have like, see, there's the gift, right? That's kind of like every kid would be like, "Oh my God, this is the worst." But it set me up for this future, right?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's amazing to hear, like you say, all these things about when you were young. It just seems a natural progression that you would end up where you did, all these skills and interests that you had and how they link into, the voices that you've done and that sort of thing. You did a couple of voices for characters in Monster High as well, the Monster High series.
Yes.
What has been some of your highlights from that?
Oh, well, they just did a reboot,
Mm.
and I was in that too, but they kind of wanted to go, more ethnically specific, like, and follow along with ethnicities as they were presented. So none of us got to do the parts that we had in the first go around. Um, that was the very first time, and that was that when I was with the agency that wouldn't give me the shot at animation. The studio knew me from my video game work, so they reached out to me and said, "Hey, we noticed your name's not on this list, and we think you should audition for this. You, I think you could do every character." And I was like, "Oh gosh," I was like, "Great! I've never even had a real animation audition. Please, yes, send it over." So she like emailed me. Her name is Julia. She's amazing. I'm still friends with her. Um, and so it's like a breakdown of every character, like the core characters from the original Monster High. And I prepared all of them like I do. I was like, I didn't know. I was like, I didn't know I was supposed to pick one or whatever. So I went in, I was like, they're like, "Okay, well, who are you reading for today?" And I was like, "All of them." And they were like, "Oh, no, like, we don't have time for that." And I was like, "Oh, okay." It's like, "Oh, well, that's really a shame because I worked on them. And
Yeah.
why don't you just let me just do it and get it out of my system? And then if there's one that you think I'm really good at or four, why don't you let me do them?" And so I did them all. And I was like, I'm pretty good. Like, that was pretty good. It felt really good, is what it was. To like stretch and flex yourself in all the different directions, right? Because I read for like the boys, I read for the girls. I gave them Claudine was Claudine. I don't know if you guys watch the show, but she always just talked like that because in Jamaica Queens, that's how all the girls on the bus talked. Like, so I was like, I was just like, it came up, and I was like, right when I saw that picture, that was like the voice I heard in my head. So it didn't say any ethnicity, it didn't say anything like that. I just kind of gave her the girls that I grew up listening to, like, that's Claudine. And then, like Cleo was kind of like Egyptian, but I don't know, I just kind of tried to make her sound royal. Like, so that was it. And then they gave us callbacks and all that. But that was another one of those things where I didn't really know what I was doing because I had never been on a show before. And we worked all the time at first. So it was like going to the gym for animation voiceover, and everyone had a different opinion because it was a new show. So there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. Everyone's giving feedback. So you're like, okay, let me take that note. Let me take that note. Okay. Okay. Whoa. Okay. Let's just try those notes. But I think like all the experience, like in theater where you're just being directed and not picked apart, but you know what I mean? Like when honing your performance, nitpicking things that you're doing, receiving direction is natural, right? Maybe for some people it wouldn't be natural. For me it was totally natural. I think most of the people that had come that far in the show, it's a part of it. And I learned so much on that show. And the best parts, which I don't know if you've heard about this from anyone else already, but they would sometimes write my two characters a scene together because they just wanted to see me. Like, I didn't go, "Oh, here's all of Claudine. Now here's all of Cleo." I would do the scene. I'd be like, "Listen, Ghoul, you are not being very nice." And then I'd go, "Oh my raw Claudine, I'm doing the best I can." And I would I'd play that whole scene. And it was like, and again, like, I thought everybody did that. And I didn't know that that was like a thing. And it was so fun. I mean, it was so fun. And it was the writing was so great. It was just like such a good time. What I loved about that show is that it was the first time I had seen a cartoon like that, where it was the original intention of the show was just that it doesn't matter what you look like on the outside. It doesn't matter where you hail from in life. Like, everyone should be everyone. I don't know where did that come from.
No, I
No.
was wondering if that was over.
Yeah, it's so funny. That happened on one other time I was on one, and I didn't know where it came from. Like, I don't know.
It
That's
was almost quite well fitting though. I thought oh she'd planned that and
I
there was
know.
some coordinated
No, I
positivity
was like,
somewhere.
my hands are here. I'm like, "Oh, is someone listening to us?" The gods, the gods above. So yeah, so it was like the whole experience was great at the time working on that show because it was like I just felt like a sponge and the people I got to work with were like, at the time Yuri Lowenthal was on it, and Kate and Laura Bailey and Debbie Derryberry, and so they were like the best, and they were all so nice, and we were like a little family. It was an incredible experience for me that I got to book two of the characters. That was super cool. Yeah.
Oh, it's amazing. And like, so to be able to work between those two characters and just seeing how easily you can summon those two voices is amazing. And you also played two characters in the 2018 Scooby Doo and the Gourmet Ghost, which, as I'm sure you can tell, is certainly something we're excited to learn a bit more about. So in regard to how you approach that, was there any kind of additional pressure going into something that was such a strong pre-existing franchise?
Well, I was such a Scooby Doo fan. I mean, like growing up, I was just like, that would be like my dream would be to be like, the part that Gray plays or whatever. Like, I mean, I love the show. So when I booked that show, I was like beside myself with excitement. And I did feel nervous. I think I never really feel nervous, and I think I was nervous because it was Scooby Doo. And I'm a chef, like in real life, like so. I was super excited, and in that one, it's like with Chef Duflay. I think it was that was a long
Yeah.
time ago, but and I was growing up in New York City, and I was a huge Bobby Flay fan, and that's him, Chef Duflay. So I used to go to his restaurant, Mesa Grill, like
Oh
on the
wow.
regular. So it was like the whole thing just felt like full circle when that came around. So I was absolutely nervous, which I never get. And I think it made me a little insecure. I think I was insecure, and that doesn't usually come up for me. Usually I feel, pretty confident in what I'm doing. But in that case, I did feel a little, nervous, I would say.
I mean, it definitely is. I think along that block of, late, 2010 films, I think it is one of the highest regarded ones. Definitely one of the more classic
Oh, good.
Scooby-Doo things. So it is amazing to hear that you were quite a fan of the franchise before that point. I mean, do you remember having a particular favorite series or character perhaps from the original show at all?
Well, I loved the mystery of it as a kid. I remember just like, trying to see if I could figure out what was really going on, like is it the farm owner, and he just couldn't afford to pay the taxes, so he wants everyone to go away, like, is it him, no, it's like the little girl because she doesn't want to move or whatever. I liked the mystery of
Mhm.
it, but yeah, the one with the glasses, I always was like, I want to be her, like I wanted to be her, like that would have been my all-time ultimate epic coming together. But I was like Scooby and Shaggy. I mean, they're just like my faves. Like, I loved them as a kid. I'm an animal lover first of all, but I love their relationship, how um they kind of humanize him. I have cats. I kind of do it with my cats. Like people are like, "Oh my God, your cats are like not cats." My cat just turned 22 years old the other day. Like
Aw.
she's not going anywhere. Like she's just like, "Oh girl, it's so good here." And then my 9-year-old cat, like he tries to talk. Like he's quiet all the time until like I'll be like, "Hey, what's going on?" And he's like, "Meow, meow, 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 meow." And I'm like, "Really?" Like, and I act like we're having a conversation, and then he'll go like, "Meow, meow." I'm like, "Uh-huh, I understand. How that must have made you feel really scared." And he's like, "Meow, meow, 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 meow." I'm like, "All right." So I think I could always relate to that. I loved how they treated Scooby like he's part of the gang. You know what I mean? He's not just a dog. Like he's special, and I love also that he's kind of like, maybe not the brightest bulb, but half the time like he was the one who really knew, he was onto it from the beginning, or he's solved the case, that was great too. And the mystery machine, I mean, oh my, I have it in Lego. I have the Lego mystery machine. That was good.
Oh, that's awesome. I think
It
that's
is
quite a
really
rare
cool.
one to get
It
now.
I
is.
know. I feel pretty special.
Oh, well, that's absolutely fantastic. I mean, I'd definitely be so starstruck to work on anything Scooby Doo related, so I just can't imagine. And I know that like, there's almost been like a swinging pendulum on how things have been recorded and how things are not. So, was that a project you recall if that was something that you would record as an ensemble piece, or was that kind of an isolated booth?
It was just alone, all alone. That was like a bummer because it's definitely way more fun when they have you record together. It, w- the gold that comes out of voiceover sessions when they allow you to record like that is like, I mean, it's just priceless because you've got all these like brilliant, talented people that have been doing this, right? So like it's like you feel comfortable enough to like riff on the script a little bit, and if the writers are secure and everything else like that, they usually love that stuff. So, some of the best lines come from when you get to work together. When you work alone, I mean, it all works out. It always amazes me how it works out because, 99% of the time, for in my case anyway, I work alone. So you don't get to hear or see anyone else. And the fact that a director can match up your performance with that person's, because it's not like they're listening to it, you know, it's incredible how that works. I mean, I am in awe of how that works to this
Yeah.
day. I don't understand. I just don't get it. It's a skill. It's a skill, definitely.
I mean, it does come together absolutely brilliantly. And like JB said, for some very long-standing Scooby-Doo fans, certainly of the later movies in that decade, Gourmet Ghost was an absolute standout. It felt like you were going back to some of the original feelings that you got when you watched Scooby. It was
Yes.
absolutely incredible. And also kind of on other legacy franchises as well. You joined the kind of Looney Tunes universe through Bugs Bunny Builders. Do you have, I don't know, it's kind of difficult to point out just one, but a favorite Warner Brothers character or franchise, or perhaps you'd like one that you'd like to do next?
Well, I would really like Penelope Pussycat to be like brought out, like, because that was it. It was just that one episode. But I have to tell you, I didn't even know that no one had brought voice to her in all those years. I didn't know that. But I got so many messages from people, and it made me. It was such a cool project to work on, right? But once I received all like the feedback and the messages, then I was like, oh my God, we need more Penelope Pussycat. Like it was because she's so fun to play. And because I speak French, right? Like, and it's great when you get to, and it's like, that's like a silly version of French, right? But it's like, oh no. Like, and he had said to me, like, he's like, oh, what we loved about yours is that like, you weren't like snotty. He's like, a lot of them were really like arrogant French. He's like, and yours was like lovable French, even though she's like, no, 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 I want this over there, that over there, whatever she's saying. Um, so that was a really fun one to work on. So, my hope is that like a lot of the fans were like, we gotta bring Pepe Le Pew and Penelope Pussycat back together. And I'm like, oh my God, can we please do that? Or can we have her show up in more of the Looney Tunes, worlds again? But I've always loved the Looney Tunes as well. I mean, like as a kid, I loved that. I don't watch it now, to be honest with you. I mean, I don't watch very much. I'm so busy, like between my son and work and having a home, and like it's like a lot, and I'm just one person, so it's a big load. And my son did a lot of voiceover too, so he was on We Baby Bears, We Bear Bears, We Baby Bears. So then it was like I was not able to do anything except be with him when he was working also. So he's not doing as much now because his voice changed and everything like that because he's 15. But it's hard to have time to watch, like, because to me that's like candy, right? Looney Tunes is like candy. Like it's so like fun, and I can't imagine having like the time to have that decadence of like the Looney Tunes right now in my life anyway. So I mean, but I love, like, I mean, I've always loved, I mean, the obvious ones, like Bugs Bunny is like one of my favorite. I mean, he was always my favorite, and I loved all the with Wile E. Coyote and his name Toucan Sam? No, Sam, the guy, gosh darn it, that guy that,
Oh, the Foghorn Leghorn, is it?
yeah, well, but what's his name?
Oh, is it Yosemite Sam?
I thought so. He's like a shorter guy
Yeah.
with like a big
The red
hat and
hair and the
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, and like him and the coyote and Bugs Bunny and all that whole stuff was always so fun with the blowing up of this and the, you know, and
Uh,
Roadrunner, like my grandmother lived in Arizona at one point, and I went to live with her for a while when I was little, and I thought a Roadrunner was like a made up thing, but no, like in Arizona, there's
Oh
Roadrunners,
wow.
like so it was like really interesting to see like a real Roadrunner and then see the animated thing of it, which I thought was just made up. So anyway, yeah.
Well, that's amazing. And certainly, like you said, revisiting some of the voices as well, there is some great potential for future projects. And with that being said, is there anything that you have coming up or that you're working on at the minute that you are able to talk about?
Well, I'm in that show that just came out like last week on Netflix called Good Times. And there's a lot of press about it. A lot of people are like up in arms about it. I happen to, it's probably my favorite thing I've ever worked on. I wasn't sure how I would feel about it when it came out, and then we went to go see it. And now I've watched the whole thing, and I'm so proud of that show, and I'm so proud of, I mean, my work individually, but everyone on that show is so good. I love the writing, I love the animation, the music, like every aspect of that show. And I think it's like it's almost comical to me that it's getting all of this negative press. People just love to be upset about things, you know what I mean? And I'm proud of that show. It like so yeah, I would say everyone needs to go watch Good Times on Netflix. There's 10 episodes. Um it's I play I'm the villain in the show. I'm on 4 of the 10 episodes as this villain character, and then I do, background voices on a couple of other episodes. But yeah, I love that. I have another show that's coming out later in the year, but I don't think I'm allowed to talk about that yet though. But I have a kind of I think I'm in 6 episodes of that show. That's really fun too. And then Arcane's coming back. And my son and I worked on a secret project together, which comes out in the fall. That's going to be a really exciting one for superhero lovers.
Oh wow.
Uh, so I don't know if there's anything that I can think of right now that I can speak on. But there's a lot of stuff coming out this year. Like, it's so funny because I feel like work has been a slow because of between the strikes and then everyone's like, oh yeah, the new year is going to be like everyone's going to be chomping at the bit to get going, and it's just not really like that. I think the machine of show business got really shuffled, and like it feels like when they shuffled, the cards like scattered everywhere, and now it's like, okay, let's get the card. Do we have all the cards? Do we want all the cards this time? It feels like it's like this really slow figuring out what's next. What is that project still a go? Oh, now we love that show, now we hate that show. We fired the person that was behind that show, so now the show is not happening. Now we don't know what's happening. So it's a weird time. It's a weird time. So I feel like there's a piece of me that feels like, oh my god, nothing's going on right now. But then you have like that show came out, and we recorded that show like 2 years ago. um and I was so glad that I think it's really good. And it's a bummer that people are having all this negative press, but at the same time, it's press. So, people are hearing about the show. People should make their own opinion about it without prejudging it. And then there's like all those other things that are coming out later in the year. And then I got to work on another video game, which I don't know if I'm allowed to say that I'm back in it, but a couple of those were characters I was in past video games. I got to record some new sessions, so I know that a couple of those characters will be coming back. I just don't want to say this thing.
Mhm.
But like, and that's always nice too and I think sometimes it's story driven, but sometimes it's fan driven. When the
Yeah.
fans are just like demanding it, you gotta give them what they want.
Oh, that just sounds absolutely incredible. We'll definitely be sure to check out all of that. And of course, for those fans, where is the best place to them? And of course, for viewers as well here watching, for them to keep up with your work.
Well, I would say that I'm mostly heavy with my like posting and sharing of stuff on Instagram. So it's at Salli Saffioti actress. So it's the spelling is challenging. So it's SalliSaffiotIACTRESS. That's my best. I don't really do Twitter, X, whatever, threads. I
Yeah.
mean, once thing because I just like it's just so much. So I just kind of picked that one. But I also share a lot about food and a lot about family because like I'm food. Like I said, I like to cook. I like to experience these different food experiences. That's why doing that Scooby Doo is really.
Oh, that's incredible. Well, I'll be sure to leave that in the description down below. And of course, that does conclude all the questions that we did have for you today. Thank you just so much for joining and for being so generous of your time. Thank you so much.
Oh, awesome. Thank you as well. It was nice to meet you both and, keep up the good work.
Thank you so much. And we do hope that everyone watching enjoyed. If you did enjoy, please make sure to like the video and subscribe. And we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.